Hi there. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Total Ramblings. This episode we are looking at Series 2, Episode 8 of Andor. And this episode is entitled, Who Are You? And I'd like to obviously say there's going to be some massive spoilers here because I'm going to be giving a full plot breakdown. So if you haven't seen this episode yet, Andor, there I go, I made that joke in the last one. If you don't want to be spoiled, then maybe come back and watch this afterwards. This whole episode is told it's all set on Gorman. And of course, as we've been anticipating, we basically see what turns out is the second Gorman massacre, which happens in exactly the same place as the first Gorman massacre, only this time possibly involving thousands of people, not just 500. And this is clearly, as we knew from Star Wars EU / Star Wars Legends, as it's known now, this is a pivotal moment in the foundation of the rebellion against the Empire. So we kind of see the ultimate pinnacle of Imperial manipulation to get what they want, which is the Calcite from deep beneath the surface of Gorman for their energy project, Death Star, right? So anyway, we start off with Andor in his hotel room, and he's assembling a rifle. It's interesting that his rifle appears to consist of, or at least one element of his rifle seems to be his Briar pistol. So it's kind of like the pistol can be expanded into a sort of carbine type affair. And, you know, he's, of course, assessing how he's going to get a shot at Dedra Meero. And he sees that the Imperials are pulling in barricades from the plaza and barricading themselves in their own building. There's been reports of mining rigs in the countryside coming down from orbit. And Dedra and Major Partagaz are having a chat. And basically Major Partagaz lays it out and says, well, you know, we've set the scene. The media has and our manipulation of the public perception of the gore basically it's all well documented at this point. Our struggles with Gorman are well documented. Basically, now we can go. We don't need to hold back anymore. We don't need to be patient. We see the Gorman front rebels getting ready with their stolen Imperial blasters. And a phrase that Major Partagaz says to Dedra is parroted literally word for word by the media. One of the news reporters says, there's a continued inexplicable Gorman resistance to Imperial norms. I mean, this is just literally they're being fed lines by the government, essentially. There's rumours of a general strike and mass demonstrations, and Syril is contacted in his room, and he's basically said, look, Imperial employees are told to report immediately to the Imperial sort of compound building, and comms are down. Meanwhile, the head of the Gorman front, Rylands, he now realises this is a trap and that the Imperials want the protesters out there. He says they've been begging us to fight, and he realises they've been played, and he's desperately trying to stop it from happening, including pleading with his daughter Enza, but she's not having any of it. This has all gone too far. He realises this has all been some kind of massive game plan. So this huge demonstration march begins with horns and flags and shouting. Andor, meanwhile, is disassembling his blaster because he doesn't think he's going to get a shot at Dedra. Rylands is begging the people to go home, and he bumps into Syril and confronts him. And Syril admits that he was there on Gorman to trap outside agitators. Rylands says, the people know what you're doing. There's mining equipment being dropped all around the planet, massive mining rigs and droids. What is it you've been sent to steal from us? And of course, Syril knows nothing about this because Cyril's been used by the Imperial Security Bureau just as much as anybody, really. Anyway, Andor leaves the hotel and wishes the guy who checked him in good luck. And the guy says, you were never here. I never actually checked you in. And I think Andor says, yeah, good luck. And the guy says, rebellions are built on hope, which is obviously a line that we get see in Rogue One. So kind of foreshadowing, I guess. Outside in the street, in the plaza, as the crowds are assembling, Andor and Syril pass right by each other, but don't see each other. Andor doesn't know who Syril is, but Cyril's been after Andor for a long time because Andor basically ruined his previous life with a previous sort of insurrection, slash event. And Andor's about to leave and head back to his ship, but he then walks back into the plaza with the demonstrators. And he sees Dedra on the balcony. Meanwhile, Syril is given sanctuary in the Imperial building and is bundled into a room where there's a bunch of security droids, of which we know K2SO is a security droid. We met K2SO, the Andor's adopted Imperial security droid in Rogue One. We also saw Andor being pinned against a wall by a security droid of the same type in Andor Series 1. And one can only assume that one of these 6 security droids is K2SO, and hold that thought. One of the droids is staring intently at Syril. Don't know why. Don't know if that's meant to be K2SO. Don't know why. Don't know whether that's meant to indicate a certain individuality. Anyway, there's a very tense face-off in the plaza, and Imperial stormtroopers begin assembling. They're appearing on the steps leading down into the plaza, and they're kind of herding people into the middle. And meanwhile, the captain, who we saw that was brought in to handle the situation in the last episode, he says to the leader of these very green troops, army troops or navy troops, I think they might be, send a patrol out. I need that way cleared. Now, as I suspected, these are very green troops who don't really seem to know what they're doing, and they are there as sacrificial lambs, and we'll find out just how prepared the Empire is to sacrifice them in a minute. But these guys, the Empire doesn't care about them. They're basically sent out there to be killed and to provoke an incident. Protesters are meanwhile chipping away at the stone for projectiles and handing out bottles, and they start to sing a very patriotic Gore song, presumably the national anthem or something like that. Syril meanwhile runs upstairs to sort of confront Dedra, and the patrol starts to head out into the crowd, and it's all very, they're right in their faces. In an amazing scene, Syril confronts Dedra, basically says, "What have you done? What are we doing here? How long have you known all about this?" And he shouts at her, and she's visibly shocked. He says there's an armada in space, dropping all this mining equipment. You couldn't even wait. And he starts to sort of physically choke her. And Dedra's very vulnerable, which is unusual for us to see her in this situation. And she reveals the plan and says to him, "You didn't seem to mind the promotions." So basically, he's been played a lot more than we thought. It wasn't just his goodwill and hard work that got him promoted. He's been groomed by the ISB, and also happens to be Dedra's lover, but that was probably just a convenience. Anyway, she kind of begs him to sort of stay, or I rather suspect, having choked Dedra, things might be all over. But anyway, he says, "Good luck, Dedra," and leaves. Meanwhile, outside, the patrol is moving forward and people start throwing stones and bottles, but it's not quite enough to kick off what the Empire wants. And in an absolutely horrifying move, and clearly, the very definition of a false flag operation, the Imperials have a sniper on the balcony, who they authorise to open fire so that hostilities will break out. And there's TIE fighters screaming overhead, presumably getting footage of all this and what have you. And the sniper starts shooting at the Imperial troops. An Imperial sniper with an Imperial weapon shooting at Imperial troops. And of course, then the patrol thinking they're under attack by the Gormans. The Gore start shooting back, and then of course we end up with a massive firefight. Stormtroopers start to open fire into the crowd, who are now penned into the plaza. And there's people start shooting back. The Gorman front have got their guns, and of course there's a massive firefight. People kind of retreat to the edges, and there's a huge fight. Stormtroopers start to die, and meanwhile there's explosives and fire. And meanwhile, this captain kind of looks on with content because with satisfaction, because this is exactly what he's set up. This is exactly what the Empire's been aiming for: is an event that will allow them to impose martial law, resettle the population, or possibly exterminate the population and get the Kalkite from the planet and destroy the planet. So there we go. Yeah. Meanwhile, Dedra, who seems to be increasingly horrified by what's going on, goes onto the balcony, and Cassian sees her and is tempted to kind of take a shot at her. And then these security droids get deployed, and people like Enza literally start flying through the air because these droids are so strong and powerful. And the irony here is that this event, this is exactly what the Empire wants, but it's also exactly what Luthen wants. Luthen is an accelerationist, and he knows that things are going to get worse before they get bad, and he wants to act as a catalyst to bring that bad situation into being now. So, this is exactly what both sides want, but they just don't realise it. Anyway, Cassian Andor is about to shoot at Dedra, and Syril now sees him. And they have this really epic fight, a real sort of grudge match. As I said before, Cassian doesn't know who Syril is, but Syril knows who Andor is and wants to kill him, basically, because of screwing up his previous life. And Syril grabs Andor's gun and is aiming it at Andor, and Andor says, "Who are you?" He doesn't know who he is. And then Rylance shoots Syril in the head, and that's it. Syril is gone. He's dead. And Andor is bustled away, and he's looking down at Syril like, who was this guy? Doesn't he have a clue who he is? That he has been living rent free in this guy's head for so long. He's been his nemesis without really knowing it. Quite interesting kind of scene, because Andor will never know. He's like, who was this guy? What's going on? Dedra's looking on, absolutely horrified. TIE fighters are flying overhead. A security droid is chasing Andor and Wilmon, and they start shooting it, and it then gets rammed into a wall by a transport and chopped in half. This is definitely K2SO, because Andor has it loaded onto the transport, and then he's presumably taking it back to his ship, his Y-Wing, which is parked outside the city somewhere. There's a mess. Wilmon goes off to find Drina, his girlfriend, who is broadcasting a message to the galaxy, basically saying, there are hundreds of murdered Gormans in Palmo Plaza. The Imperial massacre of murder of Gorman citizens has begun. Please send us help. And presumably this message goes out into the galaxy, and this is, as I say, this is a fundamental rallying call for the beginning of the organised Rebel Alliance. Dedra seems to be very upset and shaken by what she's done. Her hand is trembling. She's showing emotion, which is very rare for her. And as we finish the episode, there's a news report talking about fallen Imperial heroes. We see Syril's mum on Coruscant with a couple of friends watching the news, and presumably having heard of the death of her son, mourning his loss. The news is basically saying this is all because of outside rebel assistance. These Imperial people are martyrs, and what this is, and eternal vigilance. They don't use that word, but basically, what's the price that we will pay for our own safety? And you can see how this is all building up to martial law on Gorman. No doubt, increased crackdowns on other planets throughout the galaxy. And ultimately, of course, this is how the Empire justifies things like the Death Star. This is to protect you. We will destroy planets with dissidents on to protect the rest of the galaxy. This is how they're clamping down. So it's all part of a massive, grand strategy. But after all these years of reading about it in Star Wars EU and Star Wars Legends and other things, to actually finally see the Gorman Massacre, the second Gorman Massacre, as I say, in the same place as the first one, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. It's like when I was a kid, everyone was like, "Oh, why is Darth Vader like the way he is?" And somebody told me, "Oh, he had a fight with Obi-Wan Kenobi and fell into a volcano and he was horribly scarred." And then years and years and years later, to actually see that in a Star Wars film, it's just like seeing things that you've been told about for so long. It's just like amazing, But anyway, interesting. I liked the fact that they, unlike other perhaps TV series, or this is not an incident that happened at night. This massacre is happening in broad daylight. There was never any problem with seeing what was going on. The music was fine, not overpowering. Some real personal stuff going on between Syril and Dedra, and Syril and Andor, and Rylance and Syril, and Enza and Syril, and in the last episode. And it's just like, I like the fact that this episode didn't jump around. We just basically, it's like, okay, this is the Gorman Massacre, and we're just going to follow this all the way through. So, yeah. I'm already kind of seeing spoilers. I have been sort of what's happening in the next episode. So I'm probably going to go and watch that episode straight away right now. But anyway, thank you very much for watching this episode of Total Ramblings. Please do the usual YouTubey stuff, like, subscribe, comment, share, blah-de-blah-de-blah, downvote me, whatever you want, I don't care, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.